things that I think we could chat about. So I just want to point out a few stocks that are kind of on my radar that I'm watching, that I'm keeping an eye on as this week gets started. So let's have a little peek at some charts. Let's see what we're working with here. There are a few things worth mentioning. Um, numero uno. Let's have a little look at this right here. This is Hood. Hood is, I talked a little bit about this on Friday. I think it's an interesting one, worth watching. There's some good news that has been coming out of Hood, and that should impact them. Both the day trading restrictions. Is crypto going to pick up a little bit of a run? So these are all going to be interesting things to keep an eye on. And now we have earnings on Tuesday. So earnings are tomorrow, and I think that's going to be worth keeping an eye on, because if earnings get this really rolling, I think we've got a pretty good. I think we've got a pretty good chance of seeing some interesting moves here. If you look at the long-term chart on Hood, remember the markets, they have market memory, right? They got muscle memory. This has made obviously a significant run off these lows of around $10 a share, all the way up to about 150, almost $155 a share, and it's just kind of sitting in this middle zone here. I think there's certainly some room to run. If Hood comes out with a real bad earnings and the stock really drops, that could be an interesting opportunity to start looking to get involved at lower prices. I have very specific ways that I trade these kinds of moves and announcements and so on. And so, without getting too into the weeds and into the details on that, I think there will be an interesting way to trade the actual earnings report itself and position yourself pretty well either way, whatever the outcome might be. But that's another discussion for another day. But as long as you know that earnings are coming up, that the stock is probably going to get fairly volatile and move fairly aggressively from here, I think that's worth noting. As Hood kind of sits in this middle area, the S&P, interestingly, is just a hair off the highs, less than 1% off the highs, has made this big run up, and seems to be holding up there. Here's a couple of things that I think are worth noting. S&P sitting at highs, the VIX, working its way down. A theme that I think is worth keeping in mind is sell in May and go away, right? We're just a couple of days away from May. We're headed into that. What is that going to do for the market? We're going to find out. It could be fairly significant. And so we're just kind of ready for a little bit of higher volume in May. I always watch, and May tends to crank up the volume. We get a bit of extra, activity during the month of May, and kind of going into the first part of June. Things can kind of quiet down a little bit, July, August, in that range there. But this should be pretty busy. So we're headed into a busy several weeks, I would say, in the market, just historically speaking. So keep that in mind. Something that we've got to watch and be aware of is oil prices. Now we can say, okay, Iran, all this stuff. I'm curious what you guys think. Is our oil prices going to go down if everything gets just figured out with the Strait and with the U.S. and with Iran and with everywhere, right? Will oil prices just say, oh, okay, everything's fine, let's go back to $60? I would say that's not going to be the case. Oil has been, downtrending for a long time. These are 2022 highs, up in the 130 range. Oil went down, 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 and needed a catalyst to kind of, get back on track a little bit. We're a long way from not needing oil. And so this catalyst of, Iran and the conflict going on there, I think oil normalizes and crude prices here normalize, probably in the 80s somewhere. I think we're looking at higher oil for longer. I saw this amazing headline from Goldman Sachs this morning in Wall Street Journal, Market Watch, one of the two. And it said, if oil prices don't go down soon, then they'll stay higher for longer. And I thought, that is so insightful, right? If oil prices don't go down, they're going to stay up. I mean, let that sink in. Good grief. So there's another gem from Goldman Sachs, but oil prices are very likely to probably normalize at these higher prices. I don't think we're just going to see oil go crashing down and drop like crazy. I think they're going to stay up here for a while. So the question is, will that drag on earnings? Is that going to drag on the economy? I mean, I think the general answer is yes. Is it going to drag on the economy enough that earnings are going to be shocked to the downside? That the economy is going to slow growth and so on? That's yet to be seen. But I think it's something worth watching. I don't think we see 50, 60, even $70 oil for probably a while. So even with resolution in Iran, I think this stays, north of 80, the 80s. So that's something that I would say to keep an eye on. So Hood earnings are coming up. We've got markets sitting at highs. I think things are kind of making some moves. Stocks that I do like to keep an eye on. I've been watching this guy for a little while. I think this is getting interesting. We've got this channeling on FCX on the copper scene, and this is working its way back down. I think there's some interesting levels to be watched here. Copper is certainly a hot commodity right now. FCX is a big producer of that. So I think this stock is going to be pretty heavily on my radar. I'm really kind of liking the material stocks right now. If we just looked at materials for the moment, FCX is interesting. Alcoa, our aluminum producer, guys, this is interesting. We have a nice consolidation, a slightly broadening consolidation here. The stock price hasn't really moved since these highs of mid-January. I've been in and out of this stock multiple times and I've made pretty good money every time this year. So I've had a couple of runs at it, made some good money on it. But I think this stock has a lot of potential. When you look at some of the real long-term charts on these guys, you can see that a stock like Alcoa has kind of an upper range, around $100, and a lower range around 10, 12, $15, somewhere in there. So we're kind of right in the middle of that. Where does it go from here? Is the predominant trend going to kind of keep it going? We bottomed out here just about a year ago, right, in April of 2025, and it's been going pretty aggressively higher since. Can a stock like this continue to go higher? Is there going to be enough in the way of industrial production, manufacturing, and so on globally that this stock is going to continue pushing there? So I like FCX for that reason. I like Alcoa. I even have my little guy here that we like to watch, which is Cleveland Cliffs, right? This is CLF. This thing has been, a disaster zone for a long time, and it seems to kind of be in a bit of a bottoming out pattern. The economics of this company are slowly improving, and I think there's a lot of room for this to run up. Trading at $10 right now, and some recent highs not super long ago in the 30s. Could this make a run of a fair amount? I think there's some high possibilities here, but I don't think this would be a straightforward kind of trade where you just buy shares. I mean, you certainly could. I think this is a stock that requires a little bit of attention and a little bit of strategy. What I really like to focus on is how I apply my strategy. And my strategy is very much not a straightforward strategy. And so if you're just saying, hey, do I buy calls on this? Do I just buy shares? Whatever your strategy is, this is going to be probably a slow grinder, but I think there is potential in a stock like this. It's on my radar. I'm watching it. I think it's certainly an interesting one. While we stay in this space of materials, I think we've talked about this one a little bit. Again, kind of just watching these moves. CCJ, our uranium folk, they're just making their runs, and this one has run up, consolidated lower, run up, potentially consolidating lower. Do we have another leg higher? It's very possible. So I'm just keeping an eye on that. So it's safe to say that there are some great opportunities in kind of the industrial material space that are worth keeping an eye on. But remembering that likely oil prices will stay elevated for longer. I think that's going to be key to how all of this shakes out. But to kind of start the week, I think I'm keeping an eye on a couple of these material related stocks. I think there's going to be some opportunity here. I'll be watching these and looking for trading opportunities and ways to take advantage of some of these movements. I certainly think Hood could be interesting with earnings tomorrow. I think there's some stuff to look at there. So there are things happening. So let's keep our eyes and ears open. But just a few things to keep watch of. Remember that this week we have the Fed announcing interest rates, Fed press conference. I think this has got to be Powell's last go as Fed chairman. I think he was out in May, right? Does he have one more in May, maybe? Or do we even have a meeting in May? I don't know. It might be early June for the next one. So if so, this will be Powell's last run at it. Which adios, Powell, on to the next. But that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. The market is kind of cycling through this, are rates going up? What's happening? Where's everything headed? Yada, yada. And so I think it's worth keeping an eye on how this interest rate announcement goes this Wednesday. So watch for the FOMC news this Wednesday. Could get interesting. I'll probably do another one of these tomorrow. There's a couple of cheaper stocks that I want to talk about. So I'm going to save those for a stream tomorrow. I'm still looking into these stocks a little bit, and I think there's going to be some interesting opportunities there. So I'll have some details about that tomorrow during the live stream. But I do want to see a little more research before I make my ultimate decision on whether they're worth talking about or not. So we'll take it from there. But good to see everybody this morning. Let's have a great week. I think there's a lot of things worth looking at. We're going to kind of continue to develop this stream, see where it goes, see how it plays out. I think there's some good things to discuss. So I'd love to hear your comments. If you have stocks that you want to bring up, that you want to look into, let me know. We're all ears. And we can certainly discuss any of the details of stocks that you guys want to look at and want to keep an eye on. So let's do that. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thanks for watching, and we'll have more details coming. But just keep an eye on announcements for upcoming streams, and we're going to keep kind of just doing this, and we'll get a more regular schedule figured out as we go. But thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Have a good Monday. And keep an eye on the thread here. We'll be following up on a few of these stocks that we talked about.